coming back into the game, we have a couple things we have to do once we're in our game. And what we're going to do here is we're going to come up to create, and we're going to create an empty. And this empty, we're going to click on that and call it ground check. So I'm going to come into my scene, and you can see that ground check is right there, but I'm going to make it a child of my player. And then I'm going to reset the transform of that. So I'm going to zoom in really close so we can see what happens here. So you can see this little bitty circle right here. I'm going to add a circle collider to this. Circle collider 2D. And there's my circle collider. I'm going to change my radius to a 0.1. Look how little that is. Then I'm going to take my Y position on my ground check and I'm going to move it down to his feet. This is that ground check we've been referencing in our script, and it's going to check to see if that radius is hitting that ground. Clicking on our player, we're going to add in some layers. So I'm going to click on default, come down to add layer, and in layer 8 I'm going to call this player, and in layer 9 we're going to call this ground. It's going to tell different things what our player is and what our ground are. Coming back over to our player, I'm going to select layer and pick player. It's going to ask us, since we have our ground check, do we want that to also be a player layer? And so we're going to click yes, change children. I'm also going to come up to my background, and where it is open, I'm going to take my ground and I'm going to change that layer to ground. I'm going to come into my second background, click on ground, and change that layer to ground also. The last thing I need to do is to come in to click on my planks, open my prefab, and this should change all of them and change all of those to ground also. So going back on my player now, if I've set up all the different layers, I'm going to click on my player, come down to my player controller script, and you'll see ground check here. I can click and drag the ground check, or I can click on the picker and do a search here for ground check. And that pops in. What is ground? We want to let it know that anything that is on the layer of ground is going to be considered our ground. And that will allow me, when I click play,